Joe Biden here. This was great yesterday. I mean, pretty amazing. He's saying that, first of all, the two things you hear from them are we're making progress, and the other thing is somehow the Republicans will make it worse. Here he is saying, we're making progress, folks, not a joke.
Today's report shows, though, some progress. Overall, inflation was 2% over the last 3 months. That's down from 11% over the prior 3 months. That's progress, but a lot of it is a result of getting the cost of living at the gas pump down by more, not even California now, by more than $1 nationally. And since the start of this summer, there's a big difference for working folks.
Clay, it seems like the pitch, and I really mean this, if you were to encapsulate it honestly from Democrats, it would be vote for us because we've made things slightly less awful in the last month or two than they were the 6 months before that. I don't think that's compelling.
No, it isn't. And it's not compelling if you are paying 13% increased cost at the grocery store. It's not compelling when they're trying to brag about the price of gas being down. Yeah, it's down from $5, but it's high threes all over the country. And that's if you happen to live in a red state. A lot of you out there are paying well over $4 a gallon, and some places well beyond that right now. And I saw you tweet this, and to me, it's the essence of the question that everybody, Buck, has to be asking themselves. We have 40% of the population that's going to be on our side, right? They're just Republicans. They're convinced that Republicans are correct. They're regularly going to vote. What I'm always trying to talk to is that 20% out there that is persuadable, that is reasonable, that is rational, but oftentimes, Buck, super busy, right? They got kids, they got sporting events, they got so many obligations going on in their life. And you and I can pay attention to the nitty-gritty of campaigns, but for a lot of people, that isn't their reality. And I would just say to anyone out there that is contemplating how they're going to vote in their state, is anything better since Joe Biden became president? What in your life is better than it was on January 20th, 2021, when Joe Biden took the oath of office and became president of the United States? He tried to argue, Buck, I solved COVID. We talked about this earlier this week, but then his base rebelled against him to the point that he extended further the emergency authorizations on COVID. Did you see that happen yesterday? So even though he says COVID's over, the political power that he would have to give up to end the emergency declaration, he's not willing to do. Now, I think that's partly connected certainly to the attempt to do away with student loan debt. But everything, if you are a normal person out there, every single thing in your life that the federal government is responsible for is worse now than it was when Joe Biden came into office. And look away from what they're trying to distract you with. We're going to subpoena Donald Trump. Let's talk about January 6th or abortion, which is not on the federal ballots at all. Individual state decisions can be made there. Look at what actual tangible reality there is on inflation on the economy, on crime in your neighborhood, in your state, and in your region, and on the lack of security at the border, plus the consequences of your kids being kept out of school. I just don't see how any person with a functional brain who is persuadable can vote in any way to support Joe Biden's administration.
And the arguments that they're making, Clay, in response to all this, I mean, you just went down.
Yeah.
If someone's just looking at it honestly, like I know there's the insurrection and there's Fauci and there's all these externalities running around right now in the media. But let's just be honest about this. This has been a disaster. It hasn't been anywhere near what was promised. In fact, as you and I have both said many times, Biden has been worse than the awfulness that we promised he would be, which is, in a sense, remarkable. Like, credit where it's due, he's even more awful than we had anticipated as people who said this is not a good idea. So what's he doing now? He's saying, okay, well, maybe inflation's bad now, but the GOP would make it even worse.
We've got an election in the month. Voters have to decide. Democrats are working to bring down the cost of things and to talk about around the kitchen table, from prescription drugs to health insurance to energy bills and so much more. We're standing up for working people and the right to get a raise and get a better job. Republicans are campaigning every day on an agenda to raise your costs. If Republican wins, inflation is going to get worse.
If
It's that
Republicans
simple.
win,
I don't even understand the argument that you could make, Buck. Like, let's pretend that you are a genius economist and somehow you have decided that you're a Democrat. I understand that those things don't overlap a lot if you're actually a genius economist, because you would believe in capitalism and those kind of things, so you probably wouldn't embrace a socialist mindset or a left-wing communist mindset. But, Buck, what is the argument that Republicans could possibly make inflation worse by having control of Congress? First of all, Biden has to sign any bill that they pass. So Republicans in Congress can't pass anything. So how could they possibly make it worse? I don't even comprehend the argument. Can you even think of what he could be saying?
Well, here is, just to be clear, I've been saying this now for a little while, which is part of my, and I don't want to get into the will Biden run again, will Trump run again conversation, but what will happen is the GOP taking control will slow the damage that Biden and the Democrats can do. And so the political reality of right now, a year from now, will be very different.
It's hard to be worse.
Democrats will be arguing, oh, look, it's working. They're not going to argue, oh, look, mommy and daddy took the credit card away, so we're not acting like idiots anymore. Chris Hayes, for example, started this line of argument last night. Go ahead.
I feel confident in predicting that if Republicans win control of one or both houses of Congress, they will do everything in their power to sabotage the economy, to best set them up to retake the White House in 2024.
So he's actually even taking it in a slightly different direction, which is to say Democrats have soured this economy. Clearly, we're in a recession. We all know it. We're heading into a worse one. That's what's going on. Republicans will make things worse? No, actually, the reality, and this is where the ideological disconnect happens, is Republicans will start slowing the damage, and then Democrats, when this shows up in the numbers and the polling and the inflation numbers and everything else, will say, see, Joe Biden's going to start dropping his G's and going with more apostrophes. We're making progress. We're doing the work.
You could make a strong argument, I think, Buck, that winning both of those Senate seats in Georgia was the worst thing that could have happened to Joe Biden, because he could have partly blamed Republicans for where we are in the economy right now based on not having control of the Senate, right? And now the things would not be as bad because there wouldn't have been as much money spent. But I think what they'll do is argue the reason why things aren't better is because of the obstruction by Republicans in Congress. That's the pitch they'll try to make in 24, I think.
Because you and I also look at it from the perspective of people who were very early on, and you just go back in our Twitter feeds and see it saying, lockdowns are crazy, masks don't work, what are these lunatics doing, this is insane. And we're frustrated, I think, that there's not more of a surge in the mentality that there have to be consequences for those bad decisions in this election. But there's also the point you brought up a few days ago, which is the Democrats thought they were going to be able to say, see the science.
Yes. And
by the way, I think sometimes they do things that they know will have malicious intent, but they think it's worth it for ideological reasons. They think, for example, that by making fossil fuels more expensive, they're saving the planet. So they understand that they're getting what they want, and then they just lie about the intent. But I do believe they thought that they'd be in a much better position on COVID, and I do believe that the Democrats and Biden thought that they'd be in a place now to see, the economy's great, it's healing, because I was actually worried a year ago that when we got out of the COVID period, Clay, things would start to look really good, but we forgot? The spending. The crazy spending. Inflation was their Achilles heel.
Yeah, and it's wild to think about. If we had never done anything to try to combat COVID, and again, this is why I would love to be able to jump 50 or 100 years into the future and read the histories that are being written about 2020 and all the fallout when the external political realities of the day are gone. Maybe 100 years is the right answer. If you go read a book today about, like you were doing recently, Buck, World War I, the politics of who argued about World War I are not still vibrant, right? There isn't some group that says, oh, we got it right, the other side got it wrong. It's more of just a recitation of the narrative without the passions of the day baked in on the same level. 100 years from now, all those people who argued they were going to be on the right side of history because they were saving grandmas are going to look like imbeciles in the same way we look back now, Buck. You did the research on this, too. In the plague, you know how people wore those masks with long beaks to try to convince themselves that that was going to keep them from getting the plague? And we look at those masks now and the way that they walked around, and we say, boy, they were really not enlightened. I guarantee you there were a lot of people walking around in the plague year saying, oh, look at these idiot people who are not wearing these beaked masks that will keep us from getting the plague.
You go back, you learn about the history of Dr. Jon Snow, not to be confused with the Game of Thrones character, in 1850s London, saying, hey, guys, I think this cholera thing might be tied to the water.
Yes.
And the Faucis of the time
destroyed
all
him.
Saying, it's not in the water. It's smelly air. There's smelly air that smells bad, that kills you. So don't worry, drink the water with the bad stuff in it.
If you want to read, did you read The Ghost Map, I think is what it was called?
Mm-hmm. I'm familiar with the book. I know the story from a different book called Pandemic by Sonia Shaw.
Stephen Johnson, I believe, wrote a book called The Ghost Map, which is a really interesting and relatively easy. The guy, Stephen Johnson's a genius. He's written several great books, but that one is fantastic if you're at all curious about how science responds to new ideas.
The beginnings of J.P. Morgan Bank, one of the largest banking institutions in the world, goes back to the chemical bank, which has Oceanus, the Greek god of the ocean, or Roman god of the ocean, whatever, as its symbol, because it was initially a water importation company. To get a charter for New York State, the bank for the bank to actually get a charter, it had to do some public good, and the public good was the importation of water into New York because so many people were dying from cholera and typhus. By the way, the bank ended up not really doing it the right way.
Also, New York has some of the best water in the world still.
People say that. I love New York. I really, really do. Turns out, I'm not sure I think that's one of those things. It's like we say we have the best bagels because of our water. I'm not sure that's true either. But
I think you have good water. I'm actually defending New York City here.
I know. Look at you.